Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are peering deep into, well, the architecture of our own minds.
We are.
We're tackling something that's just so important for, navigating modern life, understanding how we perceive reality, and maybe more importantly, the psychological tools we can use to reshape negative thought patterns.
It's a really fascinating stack of material we have today. The listeners shared sources on everything from the fundamentals of self-awareness to the mechanics of cognitive reframing, all the way to specific techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Right. And our mission here is to give you that shortcut. We're pulling out the core insights on how actively changing your perspective, the story you tell yourself about what's happening, can just profoundly improve your well-being.
And this isn't just theory. We're going from the high-level ideas right down into, actual strategies you can actually use.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where do we start?
We have to start at the foundation
Yeah.
because none of the strategies work without it. And that groundwork is self-awareness.
Self-awareness. It sounds so simple, but the research defines it with a really powerful specificity. It's not just knowing you're happy or sad, is it?
Not at all. It's defined as the ability to accurately perceive one's emotions, exactly when they occur.
In real time.
In real time, yes.
Yeah.
It's that constant internal monitor that's tracking your reactions to situations, to challenges, to people around you.
Yeah.
The sources show that people who really master this, they tend to be highly confident.
That makes perfect sense. If you know how you're reacting internally, you're not going to be blindsided by your own emotions.
Precisely. They build a core belief that all problems, really regardless of how complex, can be overcome. They can be confronted through conscious, gradual analysis.
So they don't see problems as walls. They see them more like puzzles.
Puzzles, exactly.
Okay, so if self-awareness is that internal tracking system, what's the successful outcome of all that tracking? What do we call that overall state of mental stability?
That links directly to what the sources call psychological adjustment. Think of it this way. Psychological adjustment is your internal system for maintaining good internal order.
Like a mental budgeting system.
That's a great way to put it. When it works well, it frees you from stress, from conflicts, from repression. It lets you adapt and harmonize with your environment. A small emotional overspend doesn't bankrupt your whole day.
And we have hard data on this. I saw one source mention research on high school students, and it found a clear, strong, positive correlation.
A very direct link.
Yeah, the more self-aware you are, the higher your psychological adjustment and well-being.
And that well-adjusted state, it shows up in concrete traits. These are really useful as sort of benchmarks for you to consider.
Okay, like what?
Well, according to the source material, an adjusted person shows emotional stability. They have control over strong emotions like anger or jealousy. They're flexible. They avoid extremism in their judgments.
Let's pause on flexibility for a second. Does that mean not sticking to your principles, or is it more about handling new information?
It's the latter. It's about being able to absorb new information that challenges a view you've held for a long time without, having an existential crisis over it.
Got it.
They also have a realistic view of life. They accept that joy and sorrow are both just part of the deal. And they set achievable ambition levels, things aligned with what they can actually do.
That list is a great target for mental health, but that's the hard part, isn't it? It's easy to say be flexible, but how do we stop the automatic negative reactions that get in the way?
And that is the perfect transition to our next topic, cognitive reframing.
Right, CR.
Absolutely. Cognitive reframing is the technique designed to actively interrupt and change those rigid thoughts. It's about changing your mindset to see a situation or a person from a slightly different, more adaptive angle.
You're basically looking for alternative explanations for things that cause distress.
Exactly.
The sources had some great examples of this, like the case of Carla, who saw her mother's behavior as just suffocating criticism. But the reframe was so powerful, it was something like, isn't what your mother does coming from her love for you and her desire to get you ready to live on your own? It totally shifts the frame from threat to care.
And it works for big things, too. Think about a chronic illness. Instead of seeing it as this huge limitation, the reframe suggests seeing it as an internal reminder to take care of your health. It forces necessary self-care.
Okay, but I have to ask this. What about something like a traffic ticket? Reframing it as a deterrent from dangerous behavior? Isn't that just kind of intellectualizing away something that's genuinely annoying and expensive? How is this not just self-deception?
That is an excellent and necessary question. The difference is evidence. We're not looking for the happiest possible interpretation. We're looking for the most realistic and evidence-based alternative.
Okay.
The whole point of CR is to show you that your first negative interpretation isn't the only valid one. Is the ticket annoying? Yes. But its function is to remind you of the rules. Acknowledging that function, it gives you a sense of control back.
So moving from the worst interpretation to a realistic one, that distinction is key. And this isn't just a self-help trick. You said it's a cornerstone of formal therapy.
It's the bedrock of CBT. It's proven effective for everything from anxiety and depression to uh, insomnia, chronic pain, even PTSD. It works because it gives people immediate tools to manage their own thoughts, which is vital during high-stress periods like we all saw during the pandemic.
So before you can reframe, you have to know what you're reframing. You have to spot the broken thought patterns first, what are they called? Cognitive distortions.
Yes, this is where we connect the dots. You have these automatic negative thoughts that pop into your head. But underneath those, you have intermediate beliefs rules, like I must always be perfect. And even deeper, you have core beliefs, things like I am ineffective or I am unlovable.
So the distortions are like the warning light on the dashboard. They're the symptom of those deeper, unhelpful rules firing off.
Exactly, that's a perfect analogy.
Okay, so what are the most common patterns we should be looking for?
The sources list a few key ones. First is all or nothing thinking. Everything is in absolute terms. If a project isn't perfect, it's a total failure.
Black and white thinking, no gray areas.
Right. Then there's catastrophizing, where you always assume the worst-case scenario is basically a done deal. You turn a small problem into a huge disaster in your mind.
And what about the mental filter? That one sounds sneaky.
It's maybe the most insidious. You just delete the positive. You ignore 9 compliments and focus only on the one piece of minor criticism.
And then there are the ones we do to ourselves, the should statements.
Ugh, yes, I should be doing this. I should be feeling that. It creates this constant low-grade stress and guilt for not meeting these impossible expectations we set for ourselves.
So identifying these, just naming them, oh, that's catastrophizing, that's the first step to disarming them.
It's the critical first step. Once you name it, you can deal with it.
Which brings us to the tools. Once we've spotted the distortion, how do we actually interrupt the cycle? Let's get into those actionable strategies for managing overthinking.
Okay, for anyone trapped in that loop of repetitive worry, one of the simplest techniques is scheduled worry time.
Scheduled worry. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does. But you designate a specific limited window, say half an hour in the afternoon, to just process those negative thoughts. If a worry pops up outside that time, you write it down and promise to deal with it later, in its slot.
So you're not trying to suppress the thought, you're just postponing it.
Exactly. You're training your brain that the thought will be addressed, but not right now. You contain it, you control the time, instead of letting the worry control your entire day.
I also like the idea of physical interrupts, using a physical cue to just snap yourself out of it.
Yes, the material suggests wearing a wristband and giving it a sharp snap, or even just using a firm, audible stop. It's a bit of classical conditioning, really. That physical or auditory shock acts like a circuit breaker for the thought loop.
I can just imagine snapping a rubber band on my wrist in a meeting. Might get some strange looks.
You might. But if it breaks that spiral of self-criticism, it's probably worth it. And if you prefer something more internal, there's visualization. Imagining the thought just hitting a protective shield and dissolving. Or actively replacing thoughts, swapping a negative image for a pleasant memory. The key is just repetition. Repetition until that new response starts to feel automatic.
Now, to see how all this comes together, the self-management, the reframing, all of it, we really have to look at the case study of Salim.
Yes, Celine's case is a powerful example. Here was a man who was, by all accounts, highly functional, a competent, productive, good family man.
Until he lost his job.
And that event activated a deep, negative core belief he held about himself, a feeling of ineffectiveness. And his response was severe avoidance, staying home, not cleaning, isolating himself from everyone.
And his symptoms were clinically significant. The source notes his depression score on the PHQ-9 scale was an 18.
And for context, a score of 18 is in the moderately severe range of depression. So his belief that he was ineffective led directly to these very real symptoms and behaviors.
So the intervention focused on behavior first, to restore his sense of competence.
Right, the therapist essentially prescribed competence. They scheduled household chores, like cleaning his apartment and social activities. But the real magic was in how they tracked it. They used an activity chart.
And on that chart, they measured 2 things for every task: pleasure and mastery.
Pleasure, or P, and mastery, M. So, if Celine cleaned his bedroom, The pleasure score might be low, a P5 maybe, because the cleaning isn't that fun.
But the mastery score.
The mastery score would be an M8 or M9, because he did it. He completed the task successfully. Every time he did a small task and gave it a high mastery score, he was generating hard, undeniable evidence.
That directly contradicted his core belief of being ineffective.
He was literally proving to himself with numbers that he was capable and competent.
That is just a brilliant way to use objective data to override a subjective, distorted feeling. And the results, I mean, they speak for themselves. His depression score dropped from 18 all the way down to 3.
Down to the minimal range, yes. Over 8 months. It's the ultimate proof that changing your behavior and restructuring your cognition, how you think about yourself, leads to real, sustained improvement.
Which really brings us to our synthesis. True psychological well-being, it seems, it hinges on developing that self-awareness, identifying how you interpret things, and then actively reframing the negative. The steps are clear.
1. Notice your thoughts when they happen.
2. Evaluate the evidence. Is this thought actually true? And 3. Consciously adopt a more realistic, more adaptive interpretation.
But let's stress one final point here. This isn't about ignoring your feelings. You have to validate your emotions first. Acknowledge that something is causing you distress, but then you seek that alternative perspective. That methodical shift is what builds resilience.
And it all comes back to those core beliefs. Salim's success was about strengthening his positive belief that he was competent, with so much real-world evidence that it just overwhelmed the temporary ineffective state.
Indeed. And those core beliefs, they're often formed in childhood, and they become these unconscious rules we live by. I have to rely on myself, or I must be productive to be worthy.
And those rules dictate how we cope as adults, especially when we're under stress.
They absolutely do.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the learner, to consider. If self-awareness is about identifying not just emotions, but the fundamental, maybe unconscious rule that governs your biggest stress response, what is that rule for you? What's the belief that makes you catastrophize or blame? And more importantly, what small behavioral experiment, what little activity chart could you run to start testing the evidence against that rule? Think about the evidence you'd need to finally prove your most toxic assumption wrong.